Hello, everybody, and welcome to all of our audience. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Anna Slattery. I'm the manager of external affairs at the Hunger Project, and I'm thrilled that we were able to convene this group together to bring perspectives from locally led organizations to Goalmakers 2023. In this conversation, Gunjan, Nixon, and Dr. Rebecca are going to share their experiences as local organizations who are managing significant amounts of funding from Western donors. My hope is that we can all walk away from this session with actionable steps that we can all take, no matter which organization we work for or how it's funded, to strengthen locally led and community led development approaches. So I'm not going to go too much into their bios. It's all listed in Whova, but I would like to give a little bit of insight into what ties this group together. In 2015, the Hunger Project co-founded the Movement for Community-Led Development to advocate for an enabling environment for community-led development. That includes funding, governance, all of the things that are needed to have community-led development approaches thrive and be the approach of choice for organizations around the world. Gunjan, Dr. Rebecca, and Nixon have all been involved with the movement in various capacities and leadership roles, both in the global space and locally in their own countries. And I'm sure they'll speak to it a little bit, but as somebody who has been on the sidelines of the movement now for several years, it's really amazing to see the progress that's been made. 8 years since its founding, it really feels like we are at a turning point. Major funders around the world are committed to funding locally led development, and we're seeing philanthropists really turning to this approach for its effectiveness and for its transformative properties. And so I don't know anybody better to share about that than Gunjan. She's been traveling a lot to conferences all over the world in the past few months to share insights on locally led development efforts. And she actually introduced me to this concept of resetting the table so that more people can feel comfortable, included, and their voices heard. So Gunjan, I would love for you to share a little bit more on this and kind of give us a lay of the land of what's happening right now.
Thank you, Anna, and it's wonderful to be here with everyone. And to share a little more of what is happening, in this whole sector around locally led development, and really where are we heading, right? So, Anna, as we've been talking, and as you mentioned, we've I've been to a lot of conferences on locally led development this year. And one of the things we do as a movement is that we make sure that we do not go to these events just as us, right? We make sure that we go with community-based organizations, with local organizations to these events. And that's when this whole idea of resetting the table really becomes so important, because currently what is happening? What is happening currently is that suddenly the world has woken up to the need for locally led development, right? That's the intent. It's there everywhere. But no one is sure how to do it. So what's being done is you take the existing table, you somehow cram 4 more chairs onto it, and then you try and get local organizations to compete for those 4 chairs, right? And then where is this table? This table is in Copenhagen, it's in DC, it's in Geneva, it's in places where it's almost impossible for most local organizations to get a visa to get to that table, right? It's not just about the cost, it's about the restrictions that are placed on visas in most countries in Africa and in many parts of Asia. So the table is not accessible. And when you go through this, in many cases, abject humiliation, financially and mentally draining process, and somehow get the visa to be at these events, you land there, and you suddenly realize, oh my God, you don't understand the food, you don't understand the language, everything is different, and you're so busy trying to figure out which fork and which knife is to be used, right? That you can't focus on the reason you are at the table, which is to say why and how things should be done, right? And this is the challenge, and this is what we mean by resetting the table, that locally led development is not about adding those 4 seats to that table. Locally led development is about resetting this table with local actors. It is about deciding with them where should this table be. It is about deciding with them what agenda should be there. In most cases, we've seen with our, and I'm sure Dr. Rebecca Nixon would be able to speak to this from their own experience, but every time we go, we don't get the agenda on time. When it does arrive, the language is always English, because I'm sure every local actor all across the world should know and speak and be fluent in English, right? So it is not designed for locally led development. Our system is not designed for locally led development. And the challenge is that we can't expect the same people who designed the system to keep out local actors to now design a transformed system. A system for locally led development has to be designed with local actors from the majority world, right? And that's the change that we need to see if we are serious about locally led development. It is fantastic that we have the intent, but the practice of locally led development in the last couple of years has left so much to be desired. And it has left so much to be desired precisely because we are trying to have people who don't understand the local ecosystem, who do not have the lived experience of working in communities and working as local organizations, trying to design once again a system which is supposed to be for them. And that never works, right? So, so that's what really why we as a movement have been working so hard to talk about the need to reset this table. And there is progress, right? We see things happening. We've seen the donor statement on locally led development. I say donor in quotes because I hate the word donor. I think if there is anybody who is donating, it is community members who donate their time, their knowledge, their resources, right? So what we're talking about is people who put in financial resources, so funders. So the statement on locally led development, which 19 bilateral organizations signed last year, this year, 15 philanthropies signed that statement. Now, that's a big step. That is some of the world's biggest philanthropies now stepping up and saying, yes, we recognize the importance of doing locally led development. The question remains, will we be able to do it right? And that depends on who is at the table deciding on what right looks like and how it should be done.
Really well said, as always. Now everyone can see why I've been so inspired by Gunjan's kind of metaphor of resetting the table. It's incredibly powerful, I think. You mentioned two different types of funders, right? We've got the bilaterals, who are governments, and we have philanthropies, which are usually led by private individuals and their boards. So they obviously have different roles to play. You know, bilateral has challenges that a philanthropy doesn't, and a philanthropy has challenges that a bilateral institution doesn't. So I'm really curious to hear, maybe Nixon, from you first. What do you think the role that philanthropy specifically can and should be playing in strengthening locally led development?
Thank you very much for the platform. Nixon is my name. So basically, I would just want to start off, because this is not the first time that we've been having philanthropy within the space of development in Uganda. So basically, the role that local fundraisers just fill up, that quite a bit confuses me. Basically, philanthropy usually is that one of the critical roles philanthropy is able to play in the country or development space is, first of all, being intentional, first of all, ensuring that the structures in the communities are brought to the table as clearly highlighted by Gunjan, but also being able to listen to what the local structures have to say, to understand the context in which philanthropy works. And the interesting thing about this context is context differs from structure or from community to community. So basically the role is clear, but the approach is extremely important to understand that. And it involves being able to build sustainable structures in the communities that are in position to continue these discussions or this work even after the philanthropy or the word disturbs me. Even after that funding expires. So basically working through the local structures with them to ensure that there's development which is led by the communities, putting the community at the center of that development, and ensuring the communities have the opportunity to shift or to discuss or to guide a narrative around how philanthropy works. So that is one quite critical role that that such partners are able to put in place. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And we've been seeing a lot of changes in the way that these funders are interacting with local organizations. One of the nice things that a philanthropy has the benefit of is that they can bring on local voices onto their boards or onto their program design teams. They can fill those roles locally as much as possible. Whereas there's some restrictions within the bilateral and government institutions around that. And I'm curious, Dr. Rebecca, what have you been seeing as far as changes in the way that philanthropy, so the foundations, are really approaching locally led development organizations?
In my own case, I had several organizations which we partner, and most of them met me on the field. So one before the crisis, there was crisis, but it was not like bombing, killing, and all over. But there was crisis of HIV, and people were stigmatized. So we were there in the community as assisting the people. So then we started partnering, granted by USAID. Organization came, but they just gave us small thing as locally led. And when we went in the community, those who receive the big donor, they wanted to direct us in our community. So we said, okay, you have the money, you are giving us small, but we know the people personally. And there are some things that you have to allow us to do so that we will not accept your theory coming maybe from US, that this is 1, 2, 3. No. You have to accept our culture here, how to approach them. So some they accepted, but some they are not willing to do. But we said, no, we have to do it so that we will not, you will go, but we are here. So this is one. Secondly, there are some like a big organization like UNHCR. The person, he met me in on the field, and he said, can we partner? I said, okay. So there are a lot of things that the money is there in millions, but what will trickle out and given to the locally people who are really suffering will not even feed them, or will not even the blanket or the something that they give, there is nothing to the people are not really supported as they are. And even with the food, sometime it will end up in big people's hands and not the people who are suffering. They are not getting something that is tangible. That is my observation.
I can imagine it would be very frustrating to have an external party directing how you spend funding when you're so close to the community and so close to the people who are actually in need. And these people from Washington or Geneva are saying, "Oh yeah, no, you should tell them to do this. You should do this. You should do that." Um, I think it might be valuable for the conversation, especially as we're bringing in personal stories and reflections, if you can share a little bit about your organization and the work that you do. And then Nixon, I'll turn it to you after Rebecca finishes to share a little bit more about the Amani initiative as well. Rebecca, could you share a little bit about your work?
Yes, my organization, I have two. Uh, there is one, Center for Caring, Empowerment and Peace Initiative, whom I founded 1989. And it was out of my background. I was very poor, having nothing. So I started it to help the poorest of the poor, supporting the children, feeding, helping to minimize hunger and health, and work in the community that they can generate uh, funds of farm, and they will like do it themselves, but then with little empowerment from us. So we have a center where we train people in wealth creation and saving, uh, uh, empower people in handcraft, farming, and also the widows and orphans whom they saw their people being killed. We have trauma healing, and they gave us the names of people killed. We have a lot of stories. So we deprogram those who came back from Boko Haram, and we reintegrate them, and a lot of things that we do. So from that CCEPI, I have a lot of organizations that are doing wonderful things. So we come together and created strategic action for community development in Nigeria. 30 of us and 18 women-led organization, and they are doing empowerment, serving the most vulnerable, and some human rights, and gender-based violence, and a lot of things that we do together. So we are into, I can say, jack of all trade, but it's not master of none. Jack of all trade, but master of most of the things that we are into: education, health sector, and building the community and bringing the community together, and to be on the table, and they will tell us what they are doing, and then we form ourselves together with the community and then help each other. They help us, and then we help them to grow.
I think in that setting too, is like Northern Nigeria, the amount of trust that the community has to have in organizations like yours is so important, particularly as you're going through kind of post-conflict or current conflict settings. That community-led organizations really hold the trust of the people. So the
Yes.
importance of strengthening is so important. Nixon, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Amani initiative and the work you're doing in Uganda.
Thank you very much. So basically, Amani Initiative is a local organization founded in 2012 by myself. My mother was a child mother. So I basically founded an initiative to prevent and respond to child marriage, which had disabled my mother from being able to complete school and to have the opportunities I had by then. By the time I was founding an initiative, I was ready. I was an accountant working with a very good accounting firm. So I had an opportunity of going back home and found most of the people I grew up with were either married off or having children, yet basically their careers had stopped. So what I decided to do then was to start up an organization called Amani Initiative. In Lugbara, a local language spoken by the people in West Nile where the question started from, Amani means ours. So at the beginning, it was critical that we leverage the structures within the communities because the problem we are trying to address, or we still address, is extremely linked to the structures or roles in the communities. As a young man, I did not have the community mandate or legitimacy to talk about child marriage because child marriage or marriage as it is, because marriage is a decision taken by cultural leaders, by elders. The role of us as young people is just to listen and wait. So because of that factor, it was important for us to leverage the structures or the powers within the communities. So over the years, we focused our work under 4 areas. One is under education, where we are currently working with 3,000 schools across the country to basically enable young people to stay in schools through system strengthened body schools. But also, we're enabling re-entry of young mothers back into school because, like my mother, she could not go back to school since system then couldn't allow her to return back. But also, we work under sexual and reproductive health, where we are currently working with 12 health facilities directly through community facility linkages, where I link the health centers to the communities. In most cases, in most of our communities, it is complicated for people to access the services. So as part of our work, we plan to ensure that the services are directly linked to the communities where they fall. Thirdly, what we do work under socio-economic empowerment. In most cases in the communities, poverty is a big factor in terms of enabling marriage. But also poverty for young mothers, once they get pregnant and drop out of school, they have less chances, opportunities of having the best opportunities for economic empowerment. So currently, we have 15 community-led self-support groups of young mothers through which they're able to leverage, empower themselves directly. Lastly, our fourth component is around child protection and safeguarding, where it is part of a model to ensure that all our work related to child protection and safeguarding is through leveraging structures within the communities. Interesting, the way we approach, we do work through a simple terminology, through what we call low cost, high impact community-led solutions. So that model defines the way we fundraise, but also the way we design our programs. It's important that if I'm engaging a partner or a funder, the issue of sustainability comes in critically, and sustainability starts with us, the communities. So we define what does sustainability mean to the project. And that plays a very big role in shifting the narrative on how we look at philanthropy. Philanthropy must be able to work with the community structures, but also put in place the aspect of sustainability, which sustainability must be coming from the communities through which you work. So through that approach, we've been able to collaborate across the country. But the most exciting thing is the ability to leverage the structures and engaging donors of philanthropies as a point of facilitating and scaling that process, not kickstarting it, but building on what we already have established. Thank you.
Yeah, and you brought up a really, I think, important point there about the just the context that is so important that I think people from outside the community could miss, where like where marriage kind of happens, like who's deciding the marriages. It's that's an important piece to the puzzle that I think only kind of somebody who's steeped in the local culture and grew up there would understand and know how to kind of navigate the challenge, to break the cycle of child marriage. So I think that just reinforces the importance of locally led initiatives, and strengthening these organizations so that they can do sustainable work. And then while we're on kind of this more getting to know each of our speakers bit, Gunjan, I'm really curious, what got you so passionate about locally led development and community led development? What is your background in this? You're muted.
Sorry, I always do this. I come from India, right? And I've lived and worked all my life in India, actually. And it's funny, till I I joined the movement in 2019. Until that time, I did not know the terms community-led development. And yet, when I joined the movement, I realized pretty much everything I'd been doing all my life was community-led development, because I started as a grassroots activist in a small, women's organization in the northeast of India. And the whole idea was that how do you decide what needs to be done without the very women who are the fabric of that society, right? And so the idea that every person should have a voice in decisions that affect their lives has always been integral to any of the work that I've done. And I think that's true pretty much of every grassroots activist that you would ever speak to. It is this idea that it doesn't matter whether we are working with the Dalits in India, whether we are working with women, whether we are working with, religious minorities, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, the LGBTQI people. The idea that every person should have a voice in decisions that affect their voice, and the idea that every person has the knowledge, the experience, the resources, the wisdom to actually shape their voice, their life, right? What they need is the financial support. What they need is the facilitation, which has been denied to them through processes of colonialism, right? So even without knowing the terms community-led development, shift the power, locally led development, colonialism, I think the one thing which any of us who have worked with communities, are part of communities and grassroots organizing in any of the countries of, we call it the majority world because we are the majority of the world's population, Asia and Africa, right? Not the global south. We are the majority of the world's population and we want to claim that space. So we use the term the global majority or the majority world. The reality is that if you are a part of a community, if you're a grassroots activist in the majority world, it doesn't matter what terminology you use. You recognize that change cannot happen without people, without the communities. That change lies, and the knowledge that you need, the innovation, the ideas. I come from India, the land of the jugaad, where people with nothing, in villages where there is no electricity, young boys as old as 10 years. I have seen 8 and 10-year-old young boys in these communities go to garbage bins, pull out old used batteries, connect them to light, to have light bulbs working so that they can study, right? This was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, but I've seen this happen. And so ideas, innovation, solutions, change, knowledge is all in communities. And if you grew up in these communities, you see that all the time. And I think that's where my passion comes from seeing this and from knowing the capacities, but also seeing how systematically we have been denied that voice. Knowing the fact that I am at these events only because I learned how to speak English and to speak English fluently, right? So I think those discriminations we become way more aware of when we come from these communities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think if anybody was not convinced about the importance of locally led development before they came to this panel, I think they would probably be convinced at this point. So thank you all for sharing your kind of more personal stories and a little bit more about the work that you do. Turning back to this idea of how do we recast the table? How do we reset it? One of the ways that funders are really trying to bring local voices into the conversation, and albeit it is within their current model, is through co-creation processes. It's also one of the themes of this conference, and I know Global Washington really values the co-creation process, as do we at the Hunger Project, though we do know that it brings some challenges, particularly for local organizations. So just to put us all on the same page here, co-creation is the practice of collaborating with other stakeholders to guide the design process. Participants with different roles align and offer diverse insights, usually in facilitated workshops. So that's kind of the definition of co-creation. But I'd be really curious to hear, how do you think co-creation can lead to stronger grants for local organizations? What do you think the benefits of co-creation can be? Nixon, can I turn to you first for this?
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe I just want to start off from what Gunjan has mentioned, the issue of terminologies or terms in the development space and what they mean to us, the people on the ground. Most cases, we usually have challenges in terms of terminologies which have been adopted at the global level, and they usually refer differently to the global context. And that, if I bring that into the issue of co-creation, yes, co-creation is one of the best ways to come up to work together to ensure that we're able to address the challenges of the communities. And for I'm sorry, I'm having some background. Let me just try to control that. Maybe apologies about. Let me try to go to a quieter place.
Maybe while Nixon's figuring the background out, Dr. Rebecca, do you want to share a little bit on why you think co-creation could be valuable for locally led organizations?
Co-creation is valuable because the history or some people will bring their idea and then just put it on the table. Either you like it or not. And they will just say, do this, do this, do this. But in co-creation, it's very valuable because each will bring the real situation, what is happening, and what will be effective, and the need of the people on the table. And if they bring it, then they will talk, synthesize, and put the aims and their objectives and how they will tackle this problem forward. And in co-creation, each individual will bring their expertise. Like an organization, they will bring their expertise, and then some will challenge, and maybe the way that they're doing it is not the real way, or is not like perfect, but during co-creation, you will learn from each other and then make a whole that is perfect, and it will support a lot of people instead of a single or idea that is just boxed by few people. So co-creation, open it, and then it is really very, very important. I don't know how to put it, but what I mean that co-creation is if a project that you co-create with others and you do it. Example, when we co-create on Nigerian election, then 30 of us met or organization. What are we going to do? Then we bring the rigging, killing, and vote buying, and all this. So we said, okay, what are we going to do? We said, okay, number one is sensitization. Let us go out and encourage our people not to be deceived, so that people will buy them with a small thing, and then they will not vote their conscience. They will not vote the person that they will vote is because of money. So when we did that, we reached millions of people, and our sensitization, it really helped in the election, and it reduced the killings and suffering in our Nigerian election when we co-create. So this is the example of what how I want to say that co-creation will bring a lot of impact to serve a lot of people.
I love that story. It's a great
Anna,
show
sorry.
of.
Can I
Go ahead,
very
Gunjan.
quickly, just to put things in context, what Dr. Rebecca is talking about, the millions of people that they reached this year for the Nigerian elections, right, to stop the violence, it was just done with $5,000. Just to put that in
Yes.
context, that's all they used, $5,000 to reach millions of people and to reduce the incidence of violence in Nigerian elections because of this process of co-creation and the outreach that they created with their collective power. I just wanted to flag.
Yes, and we appreciate Hunger Project. They supported us with $5,000. Although we each individual contributed a lot, and some philanthropists helped, but without the push of that $5,000, we cannot move. So it's very, very important. Thank you.
It's so good to hear. And it's also just a demonstration of like when you co-create something, there's joint ownership over it. So I'm sure every person who was involved in the creation process was very excited about their role. They were really owning their role. They knew where they were contributing the best. And I'm sure that helps the dollar go further and the reach just be so much greater. Nixon, I want to turn back to you. You were making a really important point on language in particular around these processes. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. Basically, just to pick up where I stopped, the issue of language being a critical component when you're discussing co-creation needs to be brought into attention. I was just trying to reemphasize the point raised by Gunjan, but basically trying to sort of feed into my response in line is why is co-creation important. I would want to use a case point of Amani initiative. As I mentioned earlier on, I was a young man trying to address
Oh, you muted.
So am I clear? The
You're
only
clear now.
way,
Yeah.
the only way we are in position to bring onto the same page the people who were at the central point of marrying young girls was to sit with them on the same table. It enabled ownership, but also sustainability of our interventions. It is by being transparent, it's by being respectful to first of all appreciate the role of the other party towards the common good. And that is what co-creation is about. Many times over time, there's been a lot of money coming to support development aid or development in our communities. Many times, I even imagine that foreign aid is an evil to our communities. Because if I give you money without me knowing what is the money supposed to be used for, what I'll basically do will be interested to eat the money because everyone needs money. But if the money has come in without a clear purpose for what the money is supposed to do, because I was not involved in the process of using the money, it is like winning a lottery. I win a lottery, big money, but I'm not sure what's the money for because I just won a lottery. That does not imply that that lottery is going to change my life because I was not involved in the first stage of planning for it. So that's why co-creation is important. It is to enable us to, first of all, own the intervention, but also be able to bring in our different expertise, as Dr. Rebecca has mentioned. Because it is, yes, we understand that in a space for development, there are different people involved. But also it's important for us to know that it's important that by the time the funding comes in or the support comes in, the process of the idea must be brought to the table so as the people involved in it are able to discuss. So as the mind does not come in as a lottery, to ensure that at the end of the day, we are able to realize the importance of the funding, and that only comes out with through the result of co-creation by looking at the different interests of the different stakeholders. But of course, putting the interests of the community at the center of that. And this process requires us not just as the grassroots organizations, because it's common that the grassroots partners collaborate with the donors to discuss and leave out the communities who are at the center of that process. So co-creation must be intentional. What does intentionality mean? Intentionality means bring on board the people who are at the center of the problem. That is the women, that is the youth, that is the children who need to guide on how the funding is supposed to be focused on. So basically, that's what I would think through. Why co-creation is important, but also the challenges related to co-creation. Maybe just to close, as we're doing co-creation, it's also important for us to appreciate the differences in culture, differences in language, differences in capacity, but also the strength within the different roles. So if you have that opportunity to come into co-creation with that mindset, we shall be able to benefit highly in the approach of co-creation for development. Thank you.
Nixon, I'm glad you brought up some of the challenges that come along with co-creation because there are quite a few, especially when you're looking from a Western funder is initiating a co-creation process that, there's a lot of hoops to jump through for people who want to participate. And Gunjan, can you share a little bit about some of the challenges that you've seen organizations grapple with over as co-creation has become a more popular form of collaboration?
Absolutely. Before that, with your permission, I do want to share a couple of things about the importance which Nixon and Dr. Rebecca have so beautifully brought out, but with a personal story. Co-creation is how I met Dr. Rebecca for the first time. We met at a USAID co-creation workshop, and even though we did not work on a project together there, that is how MCLD Nigeria, SSEDN, that Dr. Rebecca mentioned earlier, was created. So that, just a personal anecdote about the power of co-creation, right? In the movement, we actually have a name for this now. We call this nurturing serendipity. And this is exactly as Nixon said, as Dr. Rebecca said, when you bring in so many different perspectives, so much knowledge, right? So much experience, so many ideas into one room together to think together, right? And to think together without egos and logos, because that is what co-creation requires. That is what we in the movement have as a rule for all of us. When we are in this space, we are there for this cause. Magic happens because what you get is so much bigger than what you could have ever achieved individually, even if you put it all together, right? Collectively. So, but the key there is co-creation done right. And the challenge is co-creation. Nixon spoke to terminology. Co-creation as majority world networks, organizations, right, as community-based organizations, co-creation, as Dr. Rebecca Nixon described this, co-creation as we use in the movement, unfortunately, is not how co-creation is carried out when it comes to funders. And we've been involved personally. I was involved in a co-creation process which took 3 years for funding that was for 3 years. Now, which local organization has the resources to engage pro bono in co-creation processes for that duration of time with no certainty that there will be funding coming at the end of it? Because co-creation as it's done is not done at the stage as, well, you are going to get this part of funding, let's figure out how to work with it. That's different. That's respectful co-creation, because you know that you're going to value the time, the effort that people put into play. But without that, think about the position it puts local organizations in. I'll give you an example from Sierra Leone, a national association in Sierra Leone. These local organizations came together. They engaged in a process of co-creation with a big bilateral funder for many months. It was a 16-step process. They went through 15 steps, right? Pro bono, putting all of that. They didn't have a business development person, a partnerships person, somebody to manage funder relationships. They were working in their communities and they were doing this work, right? Throughout. And after 15 rounds, they were told, sorry, you did not get this funding. Without any explanation as to why they did not get that funding. Now imagine what they have to go back and tell the communities. What it does to their relationship with that community, where you took up all of that time, people had hope. This money was going to come, it was going to change their lives. They invested months in deciding what would happen with that money and how. And suddenly there is no money. And all of that time, effort, and resources, right? Because co-creations do not happen in communities. Co-creations either happen in capital cities and in many cases not funded. You don't fund travel, so people have to on their own money go to these co-creation exercises on their own time. Or you need to somehow find internet connections to engage in virtual exercises. And then the language of the co-creation, it's not in the language of the local people. Nixon spoke about the importance of having community members in the co-creation processes. So do we expect them to speak in English? Because what is the language of our co-creations, right? So co-creation is important. It's absolutely vital and critical to community-led and locally led development. And yet co-creation, not as in an exercise, right now co-creation is essentially communities and local organizations from the majority world providing pro bono consultancy and knowledge and expertise to the world's biggest funders. And that is not what co-creation should be. Co-creation has to be a partnership. And a true partnership requires respecting the time, the effort, the knowledge, the resources of the communities and local organizations. So co-creation has to happen at the phase where a funder comes in and says, look, there is this pot of money available. What do you think would be best served? How would it best serve your communities? What do you need? And then working with the community and local organizations to see what it means like. Co-creation cannot be at the stage of competing for proposals, which is what it is right now. I'll stop there.
Yeah, like for all of our funders listening in, really making sure that there's a strategy. I think even identifying a location where the funding could be used, and then identifying partners who would be guaranteed funding, but kind of getting their ideas rather than making it a competitive. Yeah, it almost feels like those like business school competitions where you're like, what's the best business case that you can make, and then whoever gets through the 15th round would win the money. So yeah, it's an interesting attitude toward a very collaborative spirit project. But I'm curious.
We turn collaboration into competition with the current model of co-creation, which is the exact opposite of what we need as a world, not just as a sector.
Yeah. Rebecca, I'm curious, from your perspective, have you seen any additional challenges that come from the co-creation model?
The co-creation model in the locally led community non-profit, when they come together to co-create, I did not see challenges inside, because we meet, what can we do, and then we will carry it and source the funds, either money or food or non-food item, and then carry out our activities. That one is local, and I really enjoy it. But some of the co-creation, as Gunjan mentioned when we met, is so scientific and all this, and you see all different people there. Some are contractors, some are big international NGO, and if they get the fundings in millions, then they will give small to the local, and the local, we are the one who are really working. In my service in the community, I serve over 2 million people. But some of the non-profit and all this, they will come with all their millions. They will not even serve for many years. They will not serve the people. In some communities, even if they go, people will be running away from them, because like they are exploiting, getting stories, taking pictures, and after that they will leave them. So some of the co-creation is not the one that is real co-creation that is needed, that will serve the people. And some donors now, if you apply, they will say you have to bring millions. Like they will give you like 50 million naira, but you have to bring like they will give you like $1 million, but you have to bring your own like 25%, and then put it in the account. So it's not business, it's service to people. So where can you get all the money to be put in? So the philanthropists, they may give all big money to this big organization, but change the table and come to us. We, the local, we serve our local people and the community. We are in the community, and they will really get the benefit and will change their lives. Thank you.
Nixon, you had your hand raised at one point. Did you want to chime in?
Yes, I think my hand was raised. I wanted to comment. I just add on to what my colleagues Gunjan and Rebecca has clearly indicated. Co-creation is the right way to do it, but co-creation is to be done right. I've been part of different co-creation engagements in regards to what some of the projects we are either supposed to have implemented or implemented. One key challenge or problem we still face is the issue of transparency in the co-creation process, especially from put in quotes the donor or partners. Most cases, I know that there's been a shift in line to funding work in most of the global South countries, whereby they must pay partner or partners from the local organizations if projects are supposed to be successful. And in most cases, I've seen instances whereby high-level entities from the north come into our communities and discuss co-creation, but it is not clearly transparent on what this means. As Dr. Rebecca has clearly indicated, yes, you may be in a meeting discussing what needs to be done, but at the end of the day, there's information which you are not able to access. And of course, that comes in the fact that we being on the grassroots, we may not have privy or what this information is. So lack of transparency in most of co-creation processes usually make what is supposed to be a good process are a bit tainted, because at the end of the day, we find out once the project comes in that we don't know what we're beginning for. The table is not flat, even though it's supposed to be flat. So the need for us to be transparent, critical, especially for everyone who's on the table, to ensure that the books are open wide for every one of us to see what we're discussing. That's extremely important in line with co-creation. But also issues that the process, the time frame for co-creation engagements. At the moment, we are taking part in a co-creation with one of our global partners, but has taken us more than 1 year discussing co-creation. And where does the challenge come in? The challenge comes in because of the differences in ideology, especially in line is what the donor wants, what terminologies the donor wants to put into the proposal, but also what terminologies work within the communities we're expecting. So because of that, we have taken over 1 year moving like this up and down. And the interesting thing is that this period, this is time which is not facilitated, as Gunjan mentioned. But same time, we've been planning with the communities to start the project, but the delay is around the time frame that usually delays or makes the co-creation process another project of its own, unfortunately, which is not even funded. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective. That was really important for everyone to hear. So we're getting close to time. So I've got a couple more questions. Thinking beyond the co-creation process, just kind of in the business practices of funders in general. If you could change one thing that major funders do, what would it be? And how would that support your operations? How would that make you a more effective organization if that one business practice would just go away? Gunjan, can I start with you?
Well, that's easy, right? One business practice. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to actually deviate from your question because I actually do not think it is possible to change one business practice to change the system or to do locally led development. I think what we need to change, if there is one thing we have to change fundamentally, it is a mindset. It is not a business practice. And what we need to change is, Anna, initially, you know, when Dr. Rebecca was talking about her work in Nigeria, you talked about trust. And that is what it boils down to. What we have to change is that mindset. We have to, funders need to trust local organizations and communities. Because if you do that, right, then your business practices are trust based. We've seen a move towards trust based philanthropy, for instance, right? It is not one practice. And it's not even so much an operations thing as in how it's executed that matters. And how it is executed and the slew of practices flow from that fundamental difference of whether or not you trust the local organization and the community, whether you see them as partners or whether you see them as recipients of aid, of charity, of whether you see them as beneficiaries. I think that is the fundamental thing that needs to change, because if you change that, if you have trust, then how you give the money changes, right? You don't ask them to explain every dollar change in the expenditure reports. You don't ask them for endless reporting. We all want accountability, but accountability will look different when it is trust based than when it is the way it is currently done. How funding is given out will look different when it is trust based. And we are actually seeing some of this happening. The pool funds are an excellent example. We are seeing this whole idea of, what is very technically in jargon being called due diligence passporting or equivalency determination. Very simple idea, actually, despite the crazy jargon, which I don't fully understand, which is that why is it that as a local organization, every single time I have to go to every single funder or and prove my credibility? Why can it not be streamlined if I have already jumped through the hoops once? Why do I need to jump through a different set of hoops every single time for every tranche of funding? Can funders be better coordinated, right? Can there be a common set of requirements? Because surely accountability does not look different for every organization. Surely, how you're spending the money, financial reporting and compliance does not need to be different everywhere. So I think it all starts with that change around trust. If we have that, and if we can have coordination, it would make life so much simpler. I'm sure Dr. Rebecca would appreciate not doing 30 different reports and 30 different kinds of financial audits and compliance requirements, because CCEPI or Amani or SACTEN or, MAFLO in Sierra Leone, these organizations, not about becoming INGOs or creating a whole team to do these compliances, right? So I would just start there, and language access. Because if I don't know there is a pot of funding, if I don't know how to apply for it, and if you don't understand the language I speak in, or you make it mandatory for me to write in English only, then there is a whole group of really phenomenal organizations who do this work who will never be able to get that sort of funding, and there will be entire communities who will suffer.
Rebecca, I'm curious your thoughts either on what Gunjan just said or the original question on one or two, we could expand it, Gunjan, business practices that you would change that major funders have imposed, and how would it make you a more effective organization?
I will not say business, but I will say let them respect the organization and the people, and let them know that the money that they have is our own. I told one founder that he was trying to brag and all this. I said, God is the one who give money, and it is our own. We are in the world, so everybody must enjoy. It's not your own money. So let them respect, let them dignify, and let them take us that we are part and parcel of human being. Because sometimes they are too proud of themselves and looking down on the local organization like they are nothing, which is not supposed to be. They're supposed to be respect, love, dignity, and as my mentor Gunjan said, trust. Thank you.
Nixon, your thoughts?
It is very hard to talk after Gunjan and Dr. Rebecca. And since I have one addition to make, since I have the opportunity, I just want to add on one thing. Moving away from donor recipient strategy to a collaborative approach. When we talk about collaboration vis-a-vis donor, that's something which is extremely important for us to think through. It's important for donors of therapeutics to figure out that we are into this together as partners, not just as people who are supposed to submit reports or do all that. So what does collaboration mean? Collaboration is that it involves trust. Collaboration involves respect, but also collaboration provides room for failure and learn from those failures. Most of us as local organizations, we fail or we fear to report failures to our donors because relationship is based on a boss or someone you need to report to against relationship based on a collaborative level. So we need to come on the same table. It's not until that we're able to figure ourselves as collaborators that we're able to be able to directly change the narrative on how on how funding works in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for those perspectives. I'm going to read something that Gunjan wrote in the chat box, but as kind of the closing, because I think it really wraps this whole session nicely. She wrote, it's not about business practices, but it's about mindsets. Business practices are adding seats to the table, and shifting mindset is resetting that table. So I think that is kind of the perfect ending. As usual, Gunjan wraps things up beautifully and very poetically. So I just wanted to thank you all for your time today and for your candid perspectives on this situation. I think there were a lot of things that came forward in this conversation that the audience can take with them and maybe rethink the way that they're giving funding, the way that they're collaborating with others, the way that they are approaching organizations that are either bigger than themselves or smaller than themselves. And hopefully we'll just kind of continue to nudge the needle toward locally led development initiatives. So thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.